proportion of color, the amount of color being used. In this case, that is what is exceptional. There's almost nothing to challenge that amount of color, so your eye goes right there to Persephone's cloak. Here you're somewhat comparing this color to this, and all the colors are sort of kept from each other. There are no transitional areas between the colors. They're sort of neutrals between the colors. So it's large, medium, and small amounts of color that are then repeated in the stained glass window. Again, proportional amount of color because of the way the shadow works. Here the proportion is actually the kind of decorations in the fabric as against the fabric itself. There's also the lipstick against the fabric itself. So this is actually more difficult to work with. This is getting close to Gustav Klimt, but for very different reasons. Again, this is almost all browns and mud. Only here in the center do you get two complementary colors at high saturation level. Some of that is true here, but the dark light value is so strong that you barely notice the color here. Here, where there's an incandescent light, which is mainly going to concentrate on warm colors. Incandescent lights cannot do much with blues and greens and purples, and so it's doing the right thing here. This is using all of this color in the background to give you a sense of mood and atmosphere and let you know that it is nighttime. In this case, Carl Larsson's charming painting, everything's the same color. The floorboards, the wallpaper, the mat board, whatever is back here, the dress, even the complexion are almost all the same color. So the flower, the sash, these decorative elements, and this little trim on the dress wind up becoming the things that your eye goes to most strongly. Complementary contrast is not the same as complementary harmony. In complementary contrast, you're making a big deal about the difference between two colors, so you put them next to each other so that they pop. And in harmony, you're trying to make them not pop. This is so basic to human nature. This occurred before there was ever such a thing as color theory. In fact, here we see complements next to each other constantly. We see a red and a green and an orange and a blue next to each other. And that continues throughout. These are very faded colors and they're very hard for us to see. But people could figure out that cools and warms actually made each other look better, so they put them next to each other. This is meant to make them pop. Now there is a transitional area in here. Actually, there's no green that actually touches this red. But since everything's based on green and red, you remember this painting based on its extreme polarity of two different parts of the color wheel. Some of the same is true here, to such a strong degree that your eye is distracted because that becomes so important, and you barely notice his face after a while. Again, some of this is true, but the green is a little bit less saturated here, so we do look at the face, and the face is actually more evocative also. Again, some of this is the same. This was placed against this kind of warm background so that the green would really sing. And some of the same is true here. This orange background is used so that the blue would really sing. That is not an exact complement, though. That could have more red in it and less orange in it to really be an exact complement. Yes, the blue boy is so blue partly because there's almost no blue anywhere else in the painting. So he is the single blue thing. Complementary contrast to a very striking degree. This is an unusual painting because we don't expect to see this much kind of complementary contrast. Simultaneous contrast, the last of the contrast I want to talk about, is actually the most important of them. You've seen this before. I'm not showing you something you've never seen before. That gray against a black background and that gray against a white background is the same gray, but the background defines how you perceive it. So this gray looks considerably darker than this gray, but it is not darker. In this case, we've done this with a line. It's the same thing you just saw, but this line looks lighter and this line looks darker. More than that, this line looks fatter over here and it looks skinnier over here. Well, that's actually part of dark and light contrast. That when you're looking at a large field of lightness, dark things against that field tend to look smaller, but light things against a dark field tend to look larger than they are to a small degree. That's why I'm displaying this. These are 2-point rules, and these are 2-point rules, and these look at least twice as wide or heavy as these two. But that's just because that's how your eye processes that information. I'm going to ask that you stare at this. I'm going to leave this on the screen for 60 seconds and ask that you stare at this for a while. And as you're staring at it, you're seeing little flashes at the edge. You're seeing little things jumping at you at the edge, and it makes you uncomfortable doing this. Well, the chemistry in your eye is getting all used up to see that green. In fact, what you're not aware of is that green is getting duller and duller as you stare at it. And as soon as I take away the green and you have white to look at, for a split second, you saw purple. And you may be seeing a soft purple after effect still after that split second. That is called successive contrast. One thing after another, and it helps explain simultaneous contrast, but it's used in motion. It's not used in how to make one color look different. Well, you've got a neutral background right here, and you've got a blue-green line against it. You can tell that it's a blue-green line against a neutral background, and it's not very difficult. But when I change the background, that blue-green line now becomes a blue line. You would not use the word blue-green to define this, and that's because through almost algebraic cancellation of redundancies, the blue-green line already has green in it. There's already so much green here, your brain just says, oh, I've been there, done that, I just want to look at what's unique. So you define this as blue. This actually is becoming a bit more blue because of the after effect of this too. But now when I make this a blue-violet, this becomes a blue line, and this becomes a bit more of a green line. And this is stronger in thin things like lines. I've now minimize value difference. And now you can see the color difference much more strongly. I've also made the line a little bit thicker. So this now is very definitively a blue line, and this is very definitively a green line. It is the same line. There is no cheating here. It is the background that defines the line. You judge colors by the company they keep. Neighbors affect their neighbors. Okay? This is that same blue-green color. And it's against a gray background, so you can see that it's a blue-green color. There's nothing fighting it. Well, now I'm doing something that very close to what I did before, and now it looks distinctly blue. This effect seems to be stronger when you're using thick and thin lines and when you're using calligraphic feel, when things are not just straight lines, but they actually have an undulating or organic feel to them. Now you have the same effect you saw before, but it's no longer a 2-point line. It now is something more substantial, and it's an undeniable effect. And you can see in here that we have not cheated. And again, I've tried to reduce the contrast so you can see that the effect is still there. This extremely obnoxious thing that I'm doing, which I'll stop doing right now, it's difficult for you to look at. It's probably vibrating and probably is a little bit painful to look at. That has to do with the way your eye is designed and the fact that all parts of white light do not reach the back of your eyeball at the same millisecond. So your lens is trying to focus back and forth, and it creates a very physical sense of discomfort. Well, again, with the same idea, I want to go one step further. What I just showed you was how simultaneous contrast changed hue. But now I'm concentrating on saturation. This orange line that you saw now looks gray. In fact, it looks gray like that background does, because its parent, a really intense orange, has now been placed in the background. That line and that line are the same line. Nothing has changed. This gray background makes the line look orange because there is no saturation. So anything with saturation in it was going to be seen as unique. But when I put it against its complement, it's going to be even more intense. So that blue is the complement to that orange, and it makes the orange look even more orange. I'm going to do something blasphemous here. This is a painting called Le Senderman, and this is actually what the painting looks like. Why did the painter choose that bright red fabric for the background? This painting was done about 100 years ago. Well, one thing that happens is because of that background, you're not so aware of the red here. In fact, if he didn't put some reddishness in his skin, the man would look sort of lifeless and pale. He had to exaggerate the reddishness in his skin. Also, that red makes the yellow look a little bit more yellow and not so much like an orange. That red also makes this coat look even duller because that is so intense that winds up looking duller. But what if we change the background? What if we did this? The complement to the color of the background is the hair color, and this makes the hair really important. It also makes the book look a bit warmer. It also has changed the way we receive this coat, and it also makes us much more aware of the red here, but not so aware as we are if we do this. And in this case, the reds are becoming the colors that we see most in the ear, in the nose, in the mouth, here in the book, in the chair to some degree, even in some of the reflected light that is bouncing off the creases of his coat. So this is something that affects everything you do. Simultaneous contrast, which is not an isolated effect, like I said, it affects everything you do, is used here to make this seem calmer. This is so saturated, that is so saturated, and that is so saturated that that now seems very civilized. Simultaneous contrast is what makes that green look even greener because it's actually a very dull green. So putting it against a red is actually going to emphasize its greenness even more. The same thing is happening here, but when this was painted, we had more intense pigments, so we could get away with things even more. I've already shown you this, and for similar reasons. These are complementary colors. So orange is never going to look as intense as it does here as when it's against blue. It's opposite. The dress looks very, very saturated because the warm colors in the dress are so distinguished from the background. If this same dress were put on the same woman standing outside underneath the shade of a tree, you would not notice the dress so much, especially if there were blossoms in the background. This ground is largely a purple. It's not exclusively purple, but it's largely a purple, and that is the complement in additive terms of this green. So the background becomes very important here, and contrast of hue is what makes all of this work. But she stands out a bit because of that green. Your eye is going to go to complements, and simultaneous contrast is part of that. The same thing is happening here. The purple in the foreground is partly defined by the green surrounding it. And this is also true with the orange. It makes this sky look a bit bluer. And some of that is true in this case too. With this information, I hope you're going to feel more confident in how you use color. It is not a scary idea. You do not have to worry so much about harmonies, but contrast of color is a very useful tool for you to use. I hope this has been helpful. I hope that there is enough for you to go back and refer to, and I hope this has been an enjoyable 2 hours because it's been enjoyable to me. Thank you very much.